Hey students, welcome to week 6 of Introduction to Business. This week we're reviewing the ideas of creating and pricing products, and then understanding the distribution and promotion of those products. Let's look at what we're studying out of chapter 12 and 13. We're looking at discussing the product life cycle. We're looking at explaining the uses of branding and packaging and labeling. We're also looking at, out of chapter 12, examining the 3 major pricing methods and pricing strategies that firms employ. And then we're going to look at, out of chapter 13, identifying the various distribution channels and explaining marketing. And then also, lastly, out of chapter 13, one of the big concepts we're going to look at is supply chain management. Okay, as we look into this week, we're going to start with understanding the life cycle of a product. All products or services, for that matter, go through this life cycle from inception to death, womb to tomb, if you will. The cycle starts with the introduction phase, moves to the growth phase, hits the maturity phase, and finally goes into decline and eventually extinction unless there's some innovation. Profits for the product or the idea of the service actually follow a similar path. If you look at figure 12.1, it does a pretty good job of graphically depicting this life cycle, so make sure you check it out. And as by way of an example from this womb to tomb life cycle that I just mentioned, think about the network TV channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, etc. You can see a number of them shown there, even some of the cable channels. Those services have reached a level of maturity, some would say, and they're heading for decline as the internet becomes more accessible, has more bandwidth, and products and streaming products such as Netflix and Hulu are in their growth phases. So it's important to remember to innovate products and services. This allows a business to have products that are maturing and bringing in profits while funding new ideas to enter into that introduction phase. Imagine, for example, if Apple never innovated the original iPhone. Well, I think you get the picture. Okay, I want to talk for a moment about corporate branding, another topic from chapter 12. When you buy a product or service, you are making an investment in that company that you're purchasing from. Now, we don't always think of it like that in those terms, but when we spend our dollars on a product, we're buying into that brand and its image and what it says. We're helping that company survive. A few years ago, Abercrombie & Fitch, I guess more than a few years ago, probably 15 years ago now, released a number of provocative catalogs with male and female models. They also released clothing with some racist overtones to it. A number of people in the 90s and even the early 2000s, it was probably more about the early 2000s, mid-2000s, decided that branding had gone too far. Their brand was not being well accepted by their customer base. Now, when you wear their clothes, you wear their branding and their image that goes with it. And the question I want you to consider is that God-honoring? Is that image or that branding God-honoring? Is that what you want to portray? Be careful what you wear. Let's talk for a moment about pricing strategies or pricing methodologies for products and services. Chapter 12 discusses 3 different pricing methods that businesses use to establish and sell a price for their services and their products. There's the cost-based model. You might also hear mentioned as a cost plus model or markup model, meaning once the business understands the cost to produce the product or service, a markup is applied to the cost to establish the selling price. And in this model, you're always covering your cost. There's also demand-based pricing. And businesses set their prices. In this model, businesses set their prices on what they think the market will support. In this model, your prices will rise and fall with demand from the consumer. And you may lose money sometimes, but you might make a lot of money at other times. And the third is the competitive-based pricing model. Using this methodology, you intentionally set your selling price below, at, or even above your competitors. This method gives a business a lot of levers to pull on how much volume it wants to see. You know, all things being equal, if a business sets the price below its competitors, the business will sell a lot of product and gain market share and some noticeability, but profits might be tight. So setting the price high might decrease a business's hold on a market because you're not going to sell as much, but increase your overall profits. There are certainly exceptions to this, of course, and some businesses can set their prices high, maintain market share, and make a great profit. One comes to mind right away is Microsoft. It's one of those companies, and in fact, they were close to being called a monopoly because of their market dominance in the 80s and the 90s. There was really hardly anybody competing with them. They were setting their prices high. They were owning the market, and they were making some great profit. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about Chapter 13 for a moment. Let's talk about the concept of supply chain management for just a moment. There are entire courses on this topic about supply chain management. But you know what? For this class, I want us just to introduce and understand the basic concept of it. Our text defines a supply chain as a long-term partnership among channel members working together to create a distribution system that reduces inefficiencies, costs, and redundancies while creating a competitive advantage and satisfying customers. Wow, what a mouthful. Let's unpack that a little bit. Here's the basic notion of a supply chain. A business needs to establish partnerships with suppliers that it can work with to reduce the overall selling price without sacrificing quality. All right? So you have to have low price and good quality. Supply chains do not exist to deliver just cheap, low quality goods to the consumer. Supply chains exist to help a business deliver a quality product to the end consumer or the customer at a competitive price. In the automotive industry, that's where I'm from, and that's what I'm most familiar with. It's where I've worked for 25 years or so. There are 4 tiers to the supply chain structure. The top tier is called the OEM. It's the original equipment manufacturers. Those are people like, those are companies like Ford, GM, Fiat Chrysler, Toyota, Honda, etc. Those OEMs are supplied by what are called Tier 1 automotive companies, and they supply major subsystems to the original equipment manufacturers. Those are companies like Tenneco Automotive that supplies exhaust systems. Johnson Controls supplies seating systems. Dana Incorporated supplies drive chain subsystems and transmissions and axles and that sort of thing. And then there are the Tier 2s. And the Tier 2s companies, they supply stamped, welded, and formed components, like really small sub-assemblies to the Tier 1s, and the Tier 1s assemble them and send them on to the OEMs. So things like door handles and windows and brackets and that sort of thing, brake pedals, for example, all are part of the Tier 2 supply chain. And then finally, there's the raw material end of the supply chain. They supply the steel, the steel coils, the plastic pellets that get turned into plastic components, or the rubber pellets that get turned into everything rubber on the car, and epoxy and all that sort of thing. So that's just a quick look at the supply chain. And at each level of the supply chain, there's a requirement to focus on reducing inefficiencies, lowering cost, and producing quality products. All right, that's it for now. Again, read through chapters 12 and 13 thoroughly. Chapter 12 is quite long, but make sure you dig into it and understand it. Be sure to watch the devotional and check out all the materials on the Materials Needed for Success page for this week. As a reminder, your assignment paper in week 8 is an online presentation with me. It's one-on-one. This is going to be a 10-minute presentation on any one of your papers, weeks 1 through 7. Pick a topic, pick a paper, and from those weeks, turn that into a 10-minute presentation. PowerPoint probably is what most people are using. And if that's easiest, just go ahead and use it. It's what I would recommend, as a matter of fact. Make sure you check out the syllabus for the details. All right, remember, God is on his throne. He's always been there, and he's always going to be. Have a great day.